Welcome to the King Tales. Thank you for the love and support. Let's dive in. Victoria stood silently by the glass wall, her reflection merging with the golden skyline beyond. The city stretched endlessly below her, alive with noise and motion, yet she felt still, suspended between the woman she had been and the one she was becoming. Behind her, Samoa remained rooted to the spot, uncertain if this moment was real or just another dream that would dissolve with the morning light. She turned back to him, her eyes softer now, the sharpness gone. "You'll report to my estate manager tomorrow morning," she said. "He'll handle the paperwork, give you the apartment keys, and get you set up. I'll make sure the place is ready for you and the children." Samoa could only nod, his voice trapped somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you, Ma'am," he whispered again, though the words felt too small for what he wanted to say. Victoria looked at the twins, still asleep in their carrier, tiny chests rising and falling in unison. For a fleeting second, something unspoken passed over her face, a shadow of memory, a tenderness she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "They are beautiful," she said quietly. "They look peaceful." Samuel's eyes softened. "They are," he replied. "It's the first time they've slept this well since they were born." Victoria nodded slowly, as if his words carried a weight she hadn't expected. Then, after a long pause, she stepped closer to him. "Mr. Adekunle," she said, her tone measured again but without the old coldness, "you may not realize it, but you've done something remarkable." Samuel blinked, unsure how to respond. "You made me remember that money isn't power," she continued, her voice steady. "Compassion is. I forgot that for a long time." For a moment, the air between them was thick with the kind of silence that feels alive. Then she gently placed the locket back on the table and straightened her shoulders. The steel of leadership returned to her posture, but the warmth in her eyes stayed. "Go," she said softly. "Take your children home." Samoa bowed slightly, a gesture of deep respect. "May God bless you, Ma'am," he murmured. As he turned and walked toward the elevator, the weight of the past days pressed down on him, but it no longer felt unbearable. Each step was lighter, steadier. When the doors closed, Victoria remained staring after him, her eyes fixed on the empty space where he'd stood. For the first time in years, she exhaled deeply, not out of frustration or exhaustion, but release. Downstairs, the city greeted Samoa with its usual roar, horns blaring, people shouting, the humid air thick and heavy. Yet today, everything felt different. The chaos no longer frightened him, it felt like possibility. He looked down at the babies, still sleeping peacefully against his chest, and smiled. "We are going home," he whispered. He walked through the streets with renewed strength, every movement purposeful. The backpack on his shoulder no longer felt heavy, it carried hope. The lockets, wrapped carefully in tissue inside, felt like his wife's blessing guiding him forward. As he passed through the crowd, people glanced at him, the man with the babies, the calm expression, the quiet dignity, and for once, he didn't feel invisible. In the distance, the Okoro Tower gleamed in the sunlight, a monument of glass and power. But for Samoa Adekunle, the real monument was far smaller, two silver lockets stuck close to his heart, and the faint echo of a woman's compassion rediscovered. Somewhere high above, in her penthouse office, Victoria Okoro wiped the last trace of tears from her cheeks. Then she opened her drawer, took out her own mother's old rosary, a relic she hadn't touched in years, and held it tightly. Maybe, she thought, some miracles are not found in cathedrals or boardrooms, but in the quiet, unexpected mercy between strangers. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, not for wealth, not for success, but for strength to be human again. And far below, Samoa stepped into the light of a new beginning. Epilogue, 6 months later. The rainy season had come early that year. Lagos shimmered under silver clouds and restless winds, the city washed clean but never quiet. In a modest but neat apartment in Suralere, the soft hum of a ceiling fan mixed with the laughter of two babies. David and Deborah were now chubby, bright-eyed 6-month-olds who filled the small space with the kind of joy that made every struggle worth it. Their father, Samuel Adikanle, moved carefully around the room, folding tiny clothes and humming a hymn under his breath. A framed photo sat on a shelf beside a vase of fresh hibiscus flowers. It showed Samuel standing in front of a delivery van with the logo Okoro Foods Distribution Limited painted boldly on its side. Beneath it, in smaller letters, Branch Supervisor, Samuel A. He had a job now, steady, honest work that paid enough to cover rent, baby food, and the quiet dignity of independence. It hadn't been handed to him out of pity. Victoria had offered him help, yes, but only a start. The rest, he had earned with hard work and trust. As he rocked Deborah to sleep, his phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Miss V. Okoro. He smiled before answering. Good afternoon, Ma. Her voice came through, calm and precise as always, but softer now, like the edge had been sanded down by something gentler. Samuel, how are the twins? They are growing fast, Ma, he replied with quiet pride. David's already trying to walk. Victoria chuckled, a sound rare and light. Good. He sounds just like his father. There was a short pause, the kind that carries meaning without words. Samuel, she continued, I wanted to let you know, your performance these past few months has been exceptional. The regional manager mentioned your name in his report. Thank you, Ma. I'm just doing my best. I know, she said. Then her tone changed slightly. And, about the apartment. You can keep it as long as you need. Consider it a personal arrangement. Samuel hesitated. Ma, you've already done so much. Please, she interrupted softly. Let's just call it gratitude. You reminded me of something important that day. The line went quiet again for a heartbeat. Samuel didn't push further. Thank you, Ma. God bless you. When the call ended, Victoria sat in her office, on the same 25th floor where she had once looked down at the city and seen only chaos and greed. Today, the skyline looked different. The same roads, the same towers, but she could see beauty now, not just transactions. A knock came at her door. Her assistant stepped in, holding a file. Madam, the new foundation documents are ready for signing. Thank you, Ada, she said, taking the folder. On the cover, the Deborah and David Foundation, for mothers and children in need. She smiled faintly, then signed her name at the bottom with steady hands. When Ada left, Victoria stood and walked to the window. The sky had cleared after the rain, sunlight cutting through the clouds like gold. Somewhere in that sprawling city below, a man was cradling his children, their laughter filling a home that once didn't exist. And somewhere inside her, a heart that had long been locked away began to beat again, slowly, steadily, and for the first time in years, freely. Victoria Okoro took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and whispered. Maybe this is what winning really feels like. Part 2, The Cost of Redemption. 3 months later, Victoria Okoro's name was once again in the news, but this time, not for a corporate takeover or another record-breaking investment. Billionaire launches foundation to aid mothers and children affected by poverty. The headlines were glowing, the photographs flattering, Victoria standing in front of a newly renovated shelter, wearing a soft cream suit, a baby balanced easily on her hip. The world saw a woman reborn. But behind the polished image was something rawer, deeper, a quiet war inside her. Because change, she was learning, came with a price. That morning, as she walked through the main hall of the foundation, she could still hear the faint echoes of reporters' voices, the flash of cameras. But the noise faded quickly, replaced by the gentle hum of life, the soft cries of infants, the murmur of mothers talking in low tones, the sound of nurses moving briskly from one cot to another. Her high heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she entered her office, a smaller, warmer space than her corporate one. Framed photos lined the walls, smiling mothers holding babies, new apartments being handed over, scholarship signed in her name. And right there, on her desk, sat a small silver locket, identical to the one Samoa had once placed before her. Her fingers brushed over it, lingering as a knock came at the door. "Come in," she said. A woman stepped in, tall, graceful, with streaks of grey in her hair and a gaze that still carried the authority of her past. Victoria froze. "Mother." Mrs. Okoro didn't smile. "Victoria." The years between them hung like a wall. For a long time, neither spoke. The older woman's eyes swept over the office, the photos, the warm decor, the locket. "I see the papers weren't exaggerating. You've gone from boardrooms to babies." Victoria exhaled slowly. "I suppose I have." Her mother's lips curved, not quite kindly. "And why now?" "Guilt." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Maybe growth." "Growth," her mother repeated, her tone slicing. "You think money can erase your mistakes?" The words struck harder than they should have. "I'm not trying to erase anything," Victoria said quietly. "I'm trying to make something good out of what's left." Her mother's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "You sound like your father," she said, and there was something almost wistful in her voice. "He always believed in redemption. And you didn't." "I believed in survival," she replied. "Which is why we built what we did." She gestured toward the city skyline visible through the window. "All this. Our name. Our legacy. You're undoing it piece by piece." Victoria smiled faintly, a touch of pain in her eyes. Maybe it's time it was rebuilt properly this time. For a moment, silence stretched between them again. Then Mrs. Okoro turned toward the door. "I hope your new course keeps you warm at night," she said. "Because the world you walked away from won't take you back." When she left, Victoria stood still, her reflection mirrored in the window. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure if she wanted the old world back at all. That evening, her phone buzzed. A message from Samuel. "Ma, I wanted to thank you again for everything." Deborah said her first word today, "Mama." Victoria's throat tightened. She smiled, tears blurring her vision. For years, she'd built empires and conquered industries, but that single message, a baby's first word, felt like the truest victory she'd ever known. She picked up the locket again and whispered, "Maybe we're both learning how to begin." Outside, Lagos glowed, loud, alive, unbreakable. A city of second chances. And this time, Victoria Okoro wasn't watching it from above. She was finally a part of it. Part 3, The Fire and the Flood. 6 months later, the city of Lagos woke to chaos. The rain had been falling for 2 straight days, thick, relentless, unending. Streets had turned into rivers, homes into islands, and bridges into desperate crossings. The news channels called it the worst flood in over a decade. For most, it was another headline. For Samuel Adikanle, it was disaster made personal. His apartment block in Ishia, the one Victoria had given him, sat low in the valley. The drainage had failed before dawn, and by sunrise, the ground floor was under water. He had already moved the twins to the upper floor, keeping them dry with what little he had. But the water was rising fast, creeping higher by the hour, cold and brown and merciless. He pressed the twins close, their tiny hearts fluttering against his chest. His voice shook as he whispered, "Hold on, my loves. Daddy's here." Outside, thunder roared like war drums. At the other end of the city, Victoria Okoro's phone rang at 7:43 a.m. Her assistant's voice was breathless, frightened. "Ma'am, the Ishia staff block, it's been hit badly. The residents are trapped. The emergency lines are down." No one's been able to reach Mr. Adiconle. Victoria froze, her heart skipping a beat. Samuel. Yes, ma'am. Him and the twins. Without thinking, she grabbed her keys. Her chauffeur tried to stop her, but she brushed him off. Get the SUV ready. We are going now. The roads were chaos, half-submerged cars, people wading through waist-deep water, vendors clutching soaked bundles of goods. The rain pounded like a curse. Victoria sat in the passenger seat, her hands trembling as she scrolled through her phone. She called every emergency number she could find, sent messages, even tried the local police. Nothing. When the car could go no further, she got out. Her shoes sank into the muddy water, but she didn't care. She could see the building now, half submerged, people shouting from windows, children crying. And then she saw him. Samuel stood on the second-floor balcony, one baby in each arm, waving a white towel for help. His face was pale, drawn, soaked through. But he was alive. Samuel, she shouted, her voice breaking through the storm. He looked down, and for a second, disbelief crossed his face. Madam. Hold on, she cried. Help is coming. But before she could move closer, there was a sound, deep, violent, final. A crack from the building side. The old walls groaned. Samuel, get out, she screamed. He turned, clutching his children tighter, searching for a way down. The stairs behind him had already collapsed. He was trapped. Without another thought, Victoria splashed forward, shouting to the rescue crew that had just arrived. There are babies inside. We have to reach them. Ma'am, it's too dangerous. Then I'll go myself, she snapped, and before anyone could stop her, she was already wading into the rushing water. Minutes felt like hours. By the time they reached the second floor with a rescue ladder, the flood had nearly swallowed the lower level. Samuel was trembling, his lips blue, but he handed the babies over first. Take them, please, take them first. Victoria held her breath as the rescuers brought the twins down. Tiny, soaked, but breathing. When Samuel's turn came, the structure gave one last moan and collapsed. The sound tore through the air like a scream. Samuel! Victoria shouted, reaching out as the water swallowed half the balcony. But through the chaos, a hand broke the surface, his. The rescuers pulled him up, coughing, sputtering, shivering but alive. He fell to his knees beside his children, gathering them into his arms. He didn't speak. He just held them, sobbing. And for the first time in her life, Victoria Okoro, billionaire, business magnate, untouchable queen of glass towers, fell to her knees beside him, the rain soaking her hair, her face, her tears lost in the storm. Hours later, when the rain finally stopped, the sun broke through the clouds like mercy. Samuel sat wrapped in a blanket, his babies asleep in his lap. Victoria stood nearby, her clothes ruined, her hands trembling. He looked up at her and whispered, "You came." She smiled faintly, exhaustion and relief in her voice. "Of course I did." "Why?" he asked, his tone soft, bewildered. She looked out at the wreckage, the broken homes, the people huddled under tarps, the crying children. Her eyes glistened. "Because," she said, "you once reminded me what a heart looks like. I couldn't let the world take that away." That night, as emergency lights flickered across the ruined neighborhood, Victoria sat beside the twins. Their tiny lockets, their mother's memory, still hung around their necks, glinting in the faint light. For the first time, she reached out and touched one. And in that small, shining piece of silver, she felt something bloom, fragile but real. Hope. Part 4: The Quiet Between Storms. 2 weeks after the flood, Lagos was still healing. The city that never stopped moving had slowed to a hum, muddy roads, half-drowned markets, people rebuilding lives one plank, one prayer at a time. In a small temporary shelter near Surale, Samoa sat by a window, his children asleep beside him. Their twin lockets gleamed faintly in the dim light. The room was modest, the air thick with the scent of disinfectant and rain-soaked wood, but it was safe. It was enough. He had lost almost everything in the flood, his few possessions, his uniform, the furniture he'd carefully bought piece by piece. But the twins were alive. They were alive. And that made all the difference. A soft knock came at the door. He turned. Victoria Okoro stood there, dressed simply for once, no silk, no heels, no mask of control. Just jeans, a light blouse, and tired eyes that had seen too much in too little time. "Mom," Samoa said, standing quickly. She smiled faintly. "You still call me that? After everything?" "It's respect," he replied. "Not habit." Her smile deepened, tinged with sadness. "May I come in?" He nodded, pulling a chair for her. She sat carefully, her gaze moving over the sleeping twins. "They look stronger," she said softly. "They are. They didn't catch a cold. God is good." "God is good," she repeated, as if testing the words on her tongue, like they were something she hadn't said in years. For a moment, they sat in silence, the kind that feels almost sacred. The distant sound of rain whispered against the tin roof, steady and calm this time. Then she reached into her bag and slid a small envelope across the table. "What's this?" Samoa asked. "An advance," she said. "For your new position. I'm reopening the staff housing, but this time we'll do it right. Higher ground, stronger foundation. You'll be the lead foreman. I'll trust no one else with it." Samoa's eyes widened. "Mom, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," she interrupted gently. "And use part of it to buy what you need. The rest," she hesitated. "The rest is for your children's future. A small start to something better." He opened the envelope, stunned. Inside wasn't just money, it was a letter, handwritten in her elegant script. It read, "For the man who reminded me that love still exists, and that not all battles are fought for profit. Some are fought for hope. V. Okoro." Samoa blinked hard, the words blurring. "You didn't have to do this," he murmured. "I did," she said quietly. "Because I remember the man who walked into my tower that morning with nothing but 2 children and a heart full of dignity. And because you reminded me what power is supposed to do, lift, not crush." He looked at her then, really looked. The woman before him wasn't the cold, commanding billionaire who once tested his soul. She was human now. Fragile. Changed. "Thank you," he whispered. Victoria's eyes softened. "Don't thank me. Just build. For them." Her gaze drifted to the twins, still sleeping soundly. She reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek before it could fall. "You know," she said, her voice low, "when I lost my own child years ago, I thought the world ended. I buried my heart with him. I didn't think it could ever beat again." Samoa froze. She had never spoken of her past, not to anyone. She exhaled slowly. "But then you walked into my life. And somehow, those tiny lockets brought me back." Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled through them. "You gave your daughters a piece of their mother. And without meaning to, you gave me back a piece of myself." The silence that followed was deep, filled with everything words couldn't say. Finally, Victoria stood. "I should go. There's work to do." As she reached the door, Samoa said quietly, "You don't have to carry it all alone anymore." She paused, looking back. The eyes met, hers tired but alive, his humble but strong. "Maybe," she said softly, "for once, I don't want to." Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The clouds parted, and for the first time in weeks, sunlight broke through, warm, golden, cleansing. Victoria tilted her face toward the light and whispered to herself. New beginnings. Part 5, The House of Second Chances. 6 months later, the Okoro Foundation housing project stood like a promise on the edge of Suralere, a cluster of cream-painted buildings surrounded by young palm trees and laughter. What had once been a construction site of noise and dust was now alive with families, children running barefoot through the courtyard, women cooking in shared kitchens, and the smell of jollof rice and hope filling the air. At the center of it all, Samuel walked with purpose. His once thin frame had filled out slightly, and his stride carried quiet authority. People greeted him with respect now, Mr. Samuel, engineer sir, half out of gratitude, half out of admiration. He was the man who built homes that didn't fall apart when it rained. The man who understood that dignity was as important as shelter. The twins, David and Deborah, were now 10 months old. Chubby, lively, and always competing for who could laugh louder. Their lockets shone around their necks as if they carried light of their own. Samuel's small apartment overlooked the courtyard, and every morning he woke up to the sound of life, children playing, radios humming, and occasionally, the soft hum of a black Mercedes pulling up quietly outside the gate. Victoria Okoro never announced her visits. She would simply appear, dressed simply but unmistakably powerful, moving through the compound with a soft smile. People whispered her name in awe. But when she and Samuel spoke, it was without pretense. No titles, no walls, just two souls who had survived their own storms. This morning was one of those days. She stood beside him as the new water tank was installed, a project she had insisted on after the flood. You did well, she said, watching the workers secure the final bolts. Samuel smiled faintly. We did well. She gave him a look, half amused, half proud. You're learning to share credit now. That's dangerous in business. I'm not in business, Mum, he said simply. I'm in living. Victoria's laugh was quiet but genuine. Touché. There was a pause between them, filled with the sound of wind moving through palm fronds. You seem lighter, Samuel observed, studying her carefully. Different. She looked out at the families below, the mothers washing clothes, the fathers returning from night shifts, the children chasing one another barefoot. I feel different, she admitted. For years, I thought success was about control. But lately, she exhaled. Lately, I've learned that peace comes when you let go. He nodded slowly. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what matters. Victoria turned to him, her eyes lingering. You sound like someone who's lived 2 lives. Maybe I have, he said softly, glancing at his twins. One before them. One after. Something flickered in her gaze, something warm, almost dangerous. And which one is better? He smiled. The one where I stopped surviving and started loving. The words hung in the air between them, fragile but undeniable. Before either could say more, Deborah began to fuss from her stroller. Victoria knelt instinctively, picking up the tiny girl with surprising ease. Deborah stilled in her arms, fingers curling around a strand of Victoria's hair. You see, Samuel said quietly. She trusts you. Victoria looked at the baby, her expression softening in a way that would have shocked anyone who knew the steel in her reputation. I don't know why that feels like the highest compliment I've ever received, she whispered. Because it's real, Samuel said. For a long moment, she just stood there, holding the child, sunlight glinting off the silver locket around the baby's neck. Something inside her shifted again, quietly but powerfully. That evening, after the workday ended and the compound glowed under the amber light of dusk, Victoria stayed behind. Samuel brewed 2 cups of tea on the small stove in his apartment. They sat by the window, the twins asleep nearby, their breathing even and peaceful. Do you ever think, Victoria said softly, that maybe we were meant to meet that day? On the bridge. Samuel smiled faintly. I don't think. I know. She turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. Why? Because you saved my children, he said. And I think, maybe they saved you. Her lips parted, but no words came. The truth of it was too raw, too real. Outside, thunder roared faintly in the distance, but it wasn't the kind that brought fear anymore. It was the kind that watered new beginnings. Victoria looked at Samuel, then at his sleeping daughters. You've built something beautiful here, she said. Not just walls. A community. A future. He smiled gently. We both did. Their eyes met again, and this time, neither looked away. It wasn't romance yet, at least not the loud, dramatic kind. It was quieter. The kind that starts in the spaces between shared silences, built on respect, loss, and small acts of grace.